Welcome to tonight's delayed HBCU Monday edition of the Klown podcast. We both have day jobs. I'm sorry, but I'm Scott Burks. Please check me out on my sports blog, www.theklowntimes.net. You should see it here. You can also check me out on Facebook as well. So if you have a smartphone, laptop, desktop, wherever you may be or whatever, just check me out on just pull up the search window on Facebook, type of the Klown Times. Clown Spell for K, able to find me there. Speaking of the hat, get the merch at cafepress.com, search for the Clown Time Sports. And you also, I got the t-shirt. Hello. So again, hats, t-shirts, sweatshirts, mouse pads, you name it. But anyway, let's go to cafepress.com, search for Clown Time Sports. That link, it will be in the description underneath this video. Find there as well. And last but not least, please continue to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Even if you disagree with what any of us have to say, you probably will because you normally do. But anyway, we like the back and forth. We, just comment anyway. We have a great conversation about it. In any event, you'll be glad you did, and I'll be glad you did. Okay, so mentioned HBCU week. Got my guy back in the saddle. Y'all know him from the yards. /HBCU Sports, where for all things HBCU Sports. So a sleazy Reddit every Tuesday night on Facebook Live and YouTube. And last but not least, check out his great work at herosports.com, where writes about all things FCS athletics as it pertains to HBCU Sports. More on herosports.com later this evening. Dwayne Nash is back in the house. How you doing, sir?
Watch out there.
That's a shot there. Anyway,
I'm hoping that.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was gonna say I'm hoping that you enjoy your Thanksgiving, bro.
Yes, of course. It's never long enough.
No,
it's never long enough. I took my son to A&T as I normally do on my annual pilgrimage back to North Carolina, which what is in the summer or in the winter. Unfortunately, I was able to go down there just for Thanksgiving this year because mostly because my mother was able to come up early this year. But show them the alpha plot, took them around campus, showed them the new buildings, like I do every time. The students weren't on campus, obviously, so we didn't get to go into the student union. We didn't think it was open, so very nice of the students. But anyway, but next time we're gonna try and get down there right before their spring break, which is probably when my son's spring break is in middle school. So just so that, like, I remember a few years ago we was able to go down there with the students on campus, so he could see the number of students who look like him, go to college like who look like him, who go to college, who have professors a lot of whom look like him. The people run the school who look like him, because he was in the private school at the time, so he was maybe one or two or three Black people in the entire school. Although it was a small school, private Montessori, but still, he was one of the very, very few. So we wanted to reinforce that every time. So we just got the habit of taking them down there to see the campus every time we're down there anyway. So we just kept going. My brother takes my nephew and niece back to Winston State where he went to school. So, and a lot of new buildings, of course, on campus too. So. It's a beautiful thing, but like I said, it's never down there long enough. Never down there long enough to enjoy the soul food, nor the barbecue that I took for granted when I was growing up. So anyway, moral story, folks: do not take the good stuff from your childhood. Never take them for granted, because it'll be a long time before we get back to what made that good. In my case, again, soul food. There's hardly any great soul food joints in Ohio, even though we have one that's really good here in Cincinnati, but that's just one, right? And Winston-Salem grew up around 7 that were very good. And there's a lot of whom are still there, which are still there. So, which is a beautiful thing. And Greensboro too. Stephanie, shout out to him. So, anyway, so just don't take the small stuff for granted. You never know when you see it again. So
gentrification is a mother.
Yes, it is. Another lesson for you, boys and girls.
Yeah.
Another lesson for you. So there you go. All right, man. So speaking of HBCU stuff, let's go. We have a SWAC championship date. December 3rd, 4 o'clock on ESPN2. We
Or the
getting
deuce.
the SWAC is getting a little bit of some top billing, man. So basically, peep this. It's the same, obviously the same day as Championship Saturday, right? For the most of the Power Five, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's mostly Power Five and some Group of Five, even though they have intriguing matchups as well. But man, if you look at it, I think the SWAC championship game is going against both the SEC championship of CBS and the AAC championship. I think is on ABC. I think. So let me just look that up right quick. I had it up. Yeah. So basically, yeah, of course, LSU versus Georgia at 4 p.m. on CBS. Obviously, that's SEC. But really, I think it could it be maybe premature to assume that the SWAC championship game would be competitive in terms of viewership as UCF versus Tulane in the American Athletic Championship on ABC?
Yes.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes. And that is
Exactly.
very easy. Because I mean, we've seen those numbers bear out as it pertains to the bowl games.
Right.
And then we already know, and that's pre Deion Sanders. So to say that those
Correct.
games now with Deion being there and the intrigue that he brings in terms of will he or won't he move up to an FBS job? Well, I still say as of right now, based upon the available jobs that are open,
Right.
even the ones that were recently taken, I don't believe he was going to take those either. But I
Right.
digress. That's another conversation for another time.
Right.
Yes, Jackson State, Southern, I truly believe it can compete on ESPN2 against the likes of the AAC, most definitely. And it might even, depending upon what happens with the Georgia LSU situation, if that game becomes a blowout, then people are like, what else is on?
Right. And you know what? I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the Mountain West championship game is also at 4 o'clock on Fox. You think they'll be competitive against them? I think so.
Oh, most definitely.
Fresno State and Boise State, none of whom are ranked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That game was most definitely going to be off in time for the Big Ten, ACC, both which come on at 8. Like you said, Fresno and Boise, yes, it'll compete against that. Let's stop playing. UCF, Tulane, which is that region in terms of Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Florida that they're going to have to compete with.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting to see how that numbers go. We did just talk about that. Same thing with LSU, Georgia.
Yeah.
Sun Belt starts slightly before that.
3:30. Yeah, I was about to mention them. Coastal Carolina and Troy. Yeah.
And then New Mexico State, Valdosta State.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares? So basically, dude, don't be surprised at that time slot that Jackson State versus Southern will outdraw in terms of viewership, outdraw every game except for the SEC championship. I wouldn't be shocked.
I wouldn't be
shocked at that because people are talking about Coach Prime. You got two brands, Jackson State and Southern. And I mean, no disrespect to the American Athletic Conference, they got two ranked teams in the college football playoff top 25 poll. But do we really give a damn about UCF and Tulane?
No.
Exactly. So there you go.
No.
Well, I would say this, man.
Go ahead. The Orlando area in New Orleans might, but no.
You know what? I think most of the New Orleans area will be watching LSU and Georgia.
Yes. Yes, they will. Yes, they will.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying. And you have probably going to have a lot of big viewership in Louisiana, possibly in Mississippi, and maybe Arkansas. I'll be probably watching Southern and Jackson State.
Yeah.
Anyway, so either way, I think it's because Troy's in Alabama. Troy University is Alabama, so they're going to outdraw that game. So and like I said, no one's going to care about the Mountain West. No disrespect to both the squads; they're good squads, but no one cares about for the Fresno State and Boise State. But at any rate, so don't be surprised about that. But I was going to say, I've heard this just one more bit about on the SWAC championship. I saw this on Twitter from I think he's probably just a FAMU grad. I don't know, maybe maybe not, but about the possibility or the desire for the SWAC to abolish divisions, so that you
Okay.
get the two best teams in the conference championship game. Now, mind you, that would be the second best team this year was Florida A&M, just like last year. But mind you, FAMU got their asses blown off the field in the Florida Classic, right? Was it 59-3 or something like that?
Yes.
Now, I would say this to those who would bring that up. If those who've been paying attention to FAMU this year, past week 2, because they played Carolina week 1, which was a pay game. They've been Florida A&M has gotten a lot better since the first 2 weeks of the season, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So which leads me to believe, which will lead me to believe that it would be a much more competitive game. Just like people may say that Southern and Jackson State would be more competitive than the
That's the
first time
hope.
around. Yes.
Yeah, that's the hope, because that game was a 35 donut matchup.
Yes, it was a beatdown. Yeah, epic proportions, correct. So we'll see, man. But what do you think about the idea of abolishing divisions so that you get the two best teams? Like a lot of the Power Fives will be using that next year anyway. Next season anyway. Yeah.
I am pro destruction of divisions, with the exception of reducing the cost of travel. If there's a way that you can go ahead and continue to do that without necessarily having division winners, because once I became cognizant of the fact that, hey, a lot of times the second place team in a division is better than the other divisional winner.
Correct.
And we're missing out on the aspect of having those two teams play for a conference championship. Why isn't that the case?
Right.
Thankfully, some of the Power 5 conferences are starting to move over to that direction. It would be great if the SWAC were to move over to said direction as well, because last year would have been the same instance where we would have had Florida A&M and Jackson State playing in the title game last year. And I know people have come down on me for saying this. I still believe that the MEAC, with their 6 programs, should go ahead and have a championship game. And people are like, it's sour grapes from Coach Larry Scott over at Howard, because he didn't outright win the championship game, and they got mollywopped by Central during the regular season.
Right.
But in the championship format, and you have these extra weeks, why not use an additional game to generate revenue, just like the SWAC?
Right.
And go ahead and have the championship game and not have co-champions, instead of relying on a tiebreaker. Just have a championship game and have it played out on the field.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I believe to make a conference championship game relevant, in my eyes, you gotta have the two best teams going at it. Damn divisions, right? Because you see it in, look, for example, the Big Ten. I know this is Power 5, but stay with me for a moment. The Big Ten, the two best teams that matter, even though you had the ass whooping last week that Michigan put on Ohio State, the two best teams in the Big Ten are Michigan and Ohio
State. Yep.
Who would love to see that again? A lot of people would love to see that again. I would. Because it'd be magic. Can you imagine storylines? Ohio State has a chance of payback against the arch rival.
A week later.
Only a week later?
A week later. Yeah.
Dude. Yes, on the neutral field at that. Sign me up. Sign me up. I would drive. Indianapolis is only an hour and a half drive north of here. I would have to get my car. If I couldn't scalp tickets or buy tickets on the cheap, I'll be somewhere in Indianapolis watching that game. Seriously. That's how much I would love to see that matchup. And I think they're getting away from the divisions next year. I think.
I believe they are.
I know the ACC is. I know the Pac-12 already did away with them. And the Big 12 is not going to have, obviously, even with expansion, they're not going to have divisions, which is a great idea. But yeah, to your point, I think their only holdout is the SEC. So I don't know what they're going to do. But yeah, I think you think you're right. The Big Ten, I think they're going to abolish division next year, which would be great. So again, imagine the two best teams. We know what they are. Only playing each other again after only a week after the fact. Sign me up. Same with the ACC. To me, how it played out throughout the year, throughout the season, the two best teams are Clemson. It's not Clemson and North Carolina. It's Clemson and Florida State.
Mhm.
And Florida State has played well after getting beat by Clemson, and they should have won that game. They came from behind. So, could you imagine seeing that rematch?
Yeah, right.
That would be again. Sign me up, because Florida State's playing a lot better right now. They're in the top 15 in the college football playoff poll right now. Only a few spots behind Clemson, who's at 9. You think people would? You think people would be interested? Yes, yes. So exactly. Sign me up. Sign me up. So that's the whole point of that. I mean, that's why I think it will work in Jackson State's case, in SWAC's case. I think people would want to see Jackson State and FAMU. I think they would, because those, by far and away, the two best teams in the SWAC.
Yeah,
it's not even close.
Yeah, it's 2-3 months later from the Orange Blossom Classic. There are hopes there that Florida A&M has gotten better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most definitely, I would love to see that again.
So, hopefully the commissioner, more about him in a minute. Hopefully the commissioner would hear our cries and say, "Hey, you got this gold mine here. Just leverage it more. Just do some crazy stuff with it." So anyway, let's just hope that happens. But I think that would be a great idea. I think fans would line up for it, and I think it'll draw more viewership. In my humble opinion, even although Southern's not it's the next best thing. 2 brands, right? So they're good there. But again, Commissioner McCullum, do away with divisions. The big boys are doing it. I'm not saying that you have to be like the big boys, but if you got your two best squads in the same division, and they're both brands, do away with that shit. Do away with it. You'd be glad you did, and your fan base would be glad you did. Trust me on that. Let's get to speaking of playoffs. Let's get to the Division II playoffs right quick. Post like Benedict got beat by Wingate, so no more. There's no more HBCUs left in these playoffs. They had 2 turnovers. I'm looking at the stats. They had 2 turnovers, 2 interceptions. They lost 23-6. It was a thorough beatdown. Let's just be real. And I mean, now I think that this shouldn't take away to me the season that Benedict College had. I think it was a success. They were a top seed in their region, so there's nothing to hang your heads on if you're a member of that football program. But if I'm sure those young men and the coaching staff have loftier goals than just making the playoffs. So hopefully they'll come back stronger. I hope they're building this momentum. But yeah, that's a bit of a pill to swallow. It's humbling, and it happens in sports.
Yeah,
top seed losing at home, getting beat down by also a talented team, but not with as lofty expectations as you. It happens. It is what it is. But so basically, I don't know if you caught any of it or not, but if you're a member of the Benedict College program, would you take this, look at it as glass half full of, hey, there's something to build on, just keep the momentum going, or is it just an abject failure given the expectations?
I'll say this: I'm a glass half full guy, and I truly believe that there's a lesson in everything.
Right.
And I'm hoping that Benedict most definitely learns from this. Because if they don't, and they go ahead and they carry this over to next year, in terms of it being a failure, it's going to be a problem for them. Right. But again, I hope that they go ahead and they celebrate the fact that they did win the conference again. They did come into the playoffs as a number 1 seed, and they take this and they learn from this and get better for next year. But since we're talking about Division II, we're talking about the SIAC. I do have to announce that Albany State football head coach Gabe Gardina has left Albany State and will be taking the head coaching job, moving up to the FCS and coaching Charleston Southern.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So this is the let me get this right. So this is Benedict's head coach?
No, this is Albany State's head coach.
Oh, Albany State's. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. This is the East Division champion, Albany State.
Okay, I got you. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right, cool.
Giardina. I want to make sure I get that pronunciation correct. Giardina.
Giardina. Okay,
Yeah.
got you. Cool. All right, brother, man. Before we move on, talking about sports, and like when we talked about the divisions, college, some college conferences, abolishing some divisions. This will make for juicy parlays and betting on said like college championship games going forward. So what better place to do it than betus.com? So listen up, sports bettors. Your favorite sports book, betus.com, is back for our 20th year of NFL action. So with the industry's biggest sign-up bonus up to 200%, BetUS offers our members the opportunity to cash in on all your favorite sports, including NFL, UFC, and MLB. And if you're looking for live in-game betting, incredible odds with daily odds, boosts, props, and parlays, we got it. And how about fast payouts and exceptional one-on-one customer service? We got that too. So log into betus.com or call 1-800-792-3887. That's 800-79-BET-US. So betus.com, where the game begins. I also use the TKT promo code for the Klown Times as well. All right, man. Let's get back to it. Yeah. So we're talking about playoffs, right? Playoffs. We're talking about playoffs with Division Two. Let's get back to FCS, where the SWAC and our beloved MEAC reside. One of your colleagues, and I thought this was very interesting, Sam Herder from HeroSports.com, wrote a piece about FCS ADs, well, basically imploring the FCS ADs, commissioners, different conferences to push for realistic but vital changes to the playoff structure. Excuse me. So it is desperately needed, not only for the betterment of the playoff system, but for the betterment of the subdivision as a whole. So basically, he's saying that about the teams having to pay for the right to host, and how you pay so much money in this playoff system. And again, I'm just going for the I'm just getting a very high level stuff that's going on here, and I want you to break down the itty gritty because you live in this area too. Is that it's pretty much the longer you go as an FCS program into the playoffs, the more money you lose, especially if you host. Come to find out. And this ties back to a conversation we've been having with other people and with each other about the why shouldn't the SWAC teams from the SWAC and the MEAC should consider the playoffs in addition to maybe the Celebration Bowl or in lieu of the Celebration Bowl. And the reason is simple. Those squads, they don't want to spend any money if they don't have to, especially the host. I mean, what's the point of like going to the playoffs to lose money? Even as a champion, you're gonna lose some money.
Yeah.
Right. And so basically, I've come to the realization that it's best, or as you put it, pick a wife. What are you gonna do? But the wife, to me, is to stay with the Celebration Bowl. We both, I think, agree on that. And so basically, what's interesting about Sam Herder's conversation, I don't know if you had a conversation with him in the past, as you a colleague of his, is that basically Sam Herder pretty much said the same thing we say without using the same language as far as HBCUs. He said using other FCS programs, but it's basically agreeing with what we've been saying. So what are your thoughts on that?
This is most definitely an eye opener for those who are not familiar with what's been going on, especially for those especially those HBCU alums who have been championing HBCUs to participate in the playoffs. We already know how biased the system is already as it pertains to the selection committee. And for those who missed out on the interview with Commissioner Charles McClellan of the SWAC, he said something that I was aware of, but I completely zone out about whenever the discussion comes up in terms of the selection of teams and the lack of representation in the room when a team is brought up in terms of whether or not they should be selected to participate or not. Just like with any selection committee for any sport, that representative from that conference is asked to leave the room while they're debating whether or not the teams from that conference should get into that postseason play or not. Now, the only way that works in terms of advocacy is to have commissioners from other HBCU conferences, the MEAC, or having a representative from, in this instance now, the CAA or the OVC, hoping that it's someone from Tennessee State, North Carolina A&T, or Hampton to be in a room and potentially advocate for you. The question is, though, what takes more precedence? Advocating for HBCU or advocating for a conference member?
Yeah.
And that's where that discussion comes in. And the thing is, it will be interesting to know what that answer would be. I'm just wondering whether or not we would get what that real answer is. But even if they do get in, the amount of money, if you look at to host a game, that it takes to host a game, is pretty outrageous. Starting on the low end at $25,000, and if you are competing for a bid, you don't get that money back. So that's the money coming out of your pocket. And you already, I saw in another article where University of North Dakota pay upwards of somewhere between 80 to 100,000 for their bid to host the first round game in the playoffs. HBCUs ain't got that kind of dough.
Right.
They don't. And there was a conversation again with Commissioner McClellan about the need to have less money revenue gains so that they can have more competitive out of conference opponents to play, so that they could be looked as a viable candidate for an at-large bid. The thing is, though, that's the money that they're missing out of, and I learned something today. Even though it's money, it's still the low end in terms of where the money comes from on average for an FCS athletics department. The bulk of that money, and this is according to KnightNewhouseData.com, 52% of the monies that go to FCS conference teams comes from institutional / government support. So it's the money that you get from the state. That those pay games, the competition guarantees on average, Scott, come out to be 1.5% of a school's annual budget on average.
Wow.
So yeah, again, I understand, and I'm not going to say don't chase that 1%, because we need every percent of that pie that we can get, especially with the fact that HBCUs, in a lot of instances, don't get the dough that they deserve from the states that they're in. But get that dough. And I would see it as being frivolous to go ahead and pay that money out to go ahead and try to compete for a national championship in a situation that's already rigged from the get-go.
Yeah. Well said, brother. Well, I couldn't say it better myself. Yeah. So more of the story is the wife to pick. If you're HBCUs, pick the Celebration Bowl, or possibly an additional bowl. So we talked off air about that. Speaking, I'm going to touch on this right quick. We talked about this in the past about getting the prospect of getting the second bowl. Maybe have it a Thursday or Friday before the Celebration Bowl. Maybe have it like either one or two things. It could be the second place teams of both the SWAC and the MEAC. If the MEAC doesn't want to do it, maybe invite teams from other conferences that do not participate in the postseason, a la the Ivy Leagues. Maybe have our second place, which I guess second best team, I guess would be FAMU play. I don't know the standings of the Ivy League this past for this season, so I'm just going to throw out a name, Harvard, something like that. That will draw eyeballs, and you can have like both leagues in this case share the revenue of that game. I bet people will tune in. I bet there will be interest. So it's all about thinking outside the box at the state. But yeah, I agree with you. The wife to pick if you're HBCU conferences, particularly in the FCS level, stay with the celebration book. That's the most faithful. That's the most faithful wife option.
Now,
She's
to answer your
faithful
question, what
and
team
waiting
that will
for you.
be?
Mm-hmm.
To answer your question, what team that will be in terms of first place, it will be Yale this year.
Oh yeah, well there you go.
And
so MU and Yale, why not?
Why not, right?
Why not?
And to that point, in terms of who that participant would be, again, this past week, there was the SWAC championship game press conference, and Commissioner McClellan was asked about the postseason, the potentials of adding another postseason bowl games, and he let it be known that there were multiple conferences that would be interested in playing in a bowl game to that magnitude, potentially against HBCUs. And yeah, that matchup, I guess, will be dictated upon based upon what conferences or institutions will want to be involved in said postseason play. Well, in bowl game play, I should say. Right. But yeah, there are more and more teams that are starting, well, institutions and programs that are starting to come to the realization that, it probably would be more advantageous for us to go ahead if a game were to become another game or two would become a reality for us to participate in that instead of moving on and attempting to go ahead and participate in the playoffs.
There you go. I totally agree. We'll get you out here on this, man. This will probably pique your interest. Speaking of the SWAC commissioner, Dr. Charles McClellan, this is an article that's on HBCU Game, right? That pretty much talks about where it goes to the fact that the revenues. He talked about bragging on the fact that the revenues are up in the SWAC. He said they're up so much that the conference could pass some FBS leagues in the future, which is pretty. Now he broke down the numbers just a little bit. Like he was doing a 45-minute Zoom interview with the media ahead of the SWAC championship game this Saturday. So again, this is HBCUGameDay.com. Please check it out. He said this is quote, I've said this before and I say it now. We are not, emphasis on the word not, the small black college or conference anymore. We're a legitimate force. Our revenue numbers are tracking extremely strong. I have not seen any other FCS conferences revenue this year, but based on last year's numbers, we will rank first of all of FCS. Given where we are with our television contracts in 5 years, we will actually surpass 2, not 1, but 2 FBS conferences, and they might have the ability to up their numbers. End of quote. Wow.
Yeah. Very interesting quote. He's most definitely talked about that before during the spring in terms of how the amount of revenue payout via the conference has increased and its place within FCS athletics and where it matches up with other conferences, the group of 5 for the FBS. The thing is, though, and this is, again, going back to nightnewhousedata.com in terms of the amount of monies that are paid out per institution and how their budgets break down. Only 5% of, on average, a program's budget comes from NCAA/conference distributions, media rights, and postseason revenues generated. Only 5%.
5%. I was about to say, repeat that number again. 5%. Wow.
5% of that comes from the conferences and from the NCAA and from postseason appearances. So yes, that number is great in terms of how much in comparison to other programs. But when you're talking about in totality per institution, and of course that number varies from conference to conference. But again, that number is still on average 5% of the amount of money that they generate for their budgets. And like I was saying earlier, a lot of the money comes from, matter of fact, that number would be 80% of the monies generated on average for each program comes from, like I said before, the institutional / government support, meaning your state. And like I said before, that's 52%. And then 28% come from student fees. The next big chunk, donor contributions. I say it all the time. Give back. As much as you probably, some of you guys don't want to see your HBCU compete in these money games, you want to reduce that, give back. And then also, especially for those states that owe our HBCUs money, continue to fight for that money as well. Yeah. But again, that number 3 number is donor contributions. That number 4 on that list, like I just said, comes from your conference distributions and media rights. And then number 5 and number 6, but at a combined, 7%, is other revenue and corporate sponsorships. So if you can continue to get more corporate sponsorship money, that will most definitely help your institutions out as well. And then, of course, low end on that totem pole would be competition guarantee / pay games. And the lowest on that totem pole is ticket sales. So, yes, that's how it breaks down according to that website I just told you about, knightnewhousedata.com, in terms of how your budget breakdowns go on average per institution. Now, the thing is, based upon the 2021 numbers, on average, the FCS median is about 15.4. Of the of the 18 state institutions, because they don't release the private institutions, being Hampton, Howard, and Bethune-Cookman. Scott, of those 18 institutions, can you guess how many of those schools are above, based upon their 2021 numbers, above the FCS median?
Not a lot. Maybe a fraction of them, maybe.
How many?
This 12 teams in the conference. I'd say 5.
Okay. Out of those 18 institutions, only 2 are above the FCS median. Again, that median, according to knightnewhousedata.com, that median being 15.4. Prairie View was just above it at 15.8. Southern is above them at 16.2. Just below the median, North Carolina A&T at 14.1. And then you go on to get Norfolk State and Dale State in the 1300s. Alabama A&M just below them at 12.9. Same thing with Alabama State at 12.8. And then it just continues to go on from there, with Mississippi Valley State being in the cellar at 3.5 million. And that's numbers based on 2021. So again, it's about at least getting closer to that median there. That would be nice. But now that we have an understanding, again, this is according to knightnewhousedata.com, of how that money breaks down, now we have a little bit more of an understanding of, when they talk about that percentage that comes in, how much of it normally, on average, goes to an institution, how much of it, of their budget, it is for per institution.
So just so I'm an idiot when it comes to stuff like this, but so having said that, is this essentially calling BS on what Dr. McClendon said?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
Okay.
I'm not at all.
I'm make sure. Okay. Again, because I'm an idiot when it comes to stuff like this. So
yeah, because what he basically said is that they have the highest payout.
Yes.
Again, true.
Yes.
But in terms of the numbers on average, and again, this is from Knight Newhouse, until I can get more information from someplace else to prove otherwise. And trust me, somebody probably will have that number if it is false. Only 5% of the average budget of an institution comes from their conference distribution. That number might be higher for the SWAC, but I don't think it's going to be that much higher.
Sure.
I don't believe it'll be that much higher. If anything, even if it's 10%, it's still only a tenth of what the revenue is that the institution, well, the budget that the institutions, well, the revenue, I'm sorry, that the institutions get on an annual budget is.
Well, I got one more thing to say about that, and this is another quote from Dr. McLennan. We was talking about people apparently when the surgery, or maybe someone asked him about possibilities of the schools leaving the SWAC. This is what he said about that, and we can probably take this as whatever you want. This is a quote. People talk about people coming in, but what about the schools leaving? We can, and this is he was asking this like rhetorically. We can't honestly say if there's an institution that wants to leave the SWAC, they would have to go Power 5 because there's no other conference that they can get as much revenue distribution from elsewhere. What are your thoughts on
that? I don't necessarily see that as being false. I can completely see that as being the case. And now with that being said now, right? And then with the numbers that I just gave, I'm gonna need people to really understand this right now. That the bulk of the revenue, again, comes from the state.
Right.
There's student fees. And I've had conversations with people before where they were like, well, we need to go ahead and increase student fees.
Right.
Word?
Yeah, I heard that.
Okay, I mean, you could try that. But let me go ahead and guarantee you this. If the number is beyond what the average cost is per institution to have student fees, one, the students will figure it out. Two, they will revolt. Three, they will start to leave your institution.
Yeah.
These members are not going to sit here and take it, especially with some of the numbers suggested that they should start charging at HBCUs for student fees. I laughed in their face. Well, not via DM, but yeah, I would have laughed
from the safe place. Yeah.
No, it wouldn't have mattered. If they would have said it to me, if they would have said it to me in my face, I would have laughed in their face. Because there's no way in the world that a student is going to pay that number. Just to give you an idea, on average, student fees are about $200 for athletics. Sure. Some places I've seen closer to $300. Some places I've seen under $200. Case in point, University of Maryland is under $200. I've heard people say they maybe should go ahead and double, triple, maybe even quadruple the amount that they pay at HBCUs to go ahead and try to close that gap for so they can go ahead and compete with other FCS programs.
Hence the revenue of your temple.
Yeah, right? How dare you?
Yeah.
How dare you? They're not, no! Why? Especially if it's going to be a program where they go out and they don't compete. Why?
How,
Are you kidding me? There's no way. There's no way. So,
that will never happen.
No, it won't.
That will never. I'm not trying to I try to stay away from all or every or never, but that will never happen. No one in my right mind at those institutions will pay an exorbitant amount of money for athletics. There's no way.
And that was the easy solution. Let's increase enrollment and increase student fees, and we'll close that gap.
Crazy.
No, that's not how that works. Right. I mean, that's a way for you to get more because, like I said before, that's 25% of your budget.
Right.
But you're not going to close a $10 million gap by charging these kids $900 a pop for student fees.
No.
I'm hoping people who are out there listening to me say this right now are laughing because it is insane. But these are the conversations that I'm having with people who want to see that gap closed. No, I'm not going to go ahead and put the bearing all on the students. That should go on alumni. Actually, it should go on the state, number one. Make sure that we're getting all that dough from them. Number two, alumni. Three, looking to increase corporate sponsorship.
There you go. Now, where can the
and then figure out ways to get the conference to chip in a little bit more too. But that's again still a small piece of that pie.
Got it. So where can the great people on Twitter or in social media world find you?
Again, As always, you can find me at the Yard HBCU on all forms of social media, and you can find my weekly work with herosports.com, where I'll be previewing the SWAC championship game coming up this week.
Well said. All right, man. So check this brother out. And by the way, I forgot to mention this earlier in the podcast. Those links to herosports.com, the Yard HBCU.com, they'll be in the description as always on this video when on YouTube rather. I'm trying to get this say that, but anyway. So hope y'all enjoy. I'm sure you will enjoy the Celebration Bowl, and watch for those numbers. Watch for those numbers. We're gonna talk about the numbers next week. But
I
guarantee you, they're gonna more than compete. The SWAC championship will more than compete with the other conference championships outside of maybe the SEC championship.
Yeah.
So until next time, guys and gals, have a great weekend. Be safe, be cool, stay warm. Take care. Peace out.